There's never a dull moment in Eurasia. While Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be skipping the Shanghai Cooperation Summit, the SCO, soon to be held in Kazakhstan, the long overdue bilateral meeting between India and Russia seems likely in July. This salient expression of India's multi-alignment comes at a time when heady geopolitical winds have been surging. Now, as far as its old friend Russia is concerned, India must iron out genuine issues that have been haunting the two sides for a few years, at least ever since the war in Ukraine started. So the decision to not attend the SCO summit was a bit surprising, and Modi's gala welcome at the G7 in Italy, a grouping of elite Western economies where India is not a member but has been invited consistently, exemplified the contrast. However, the likely revival of Modi-Putin summit has once again underscored that India operates in national interest, and it is time to address emerging realities in a constructive manner. So, in the wake of the Ukraine war and the unprecedented deepening of strategic alignment between Russia and China, New Delhi's ties with Moscow have to evolve. The two sides will now start discussions on a long-awaited logistics exchange agreement that will give India better access into the Arctic. But there's still time for that. However, from the largest supplier of defense equipment, Russia is now playing a more visible role in India's energy sector. However, in the aftermath of a long-standing war of attrition that has seen a weaponization of everything, it is important to fix bilateral issues through enabling frameworks at the highest level. Let's take a relook at the priorities of Modi 3.0. A humbled NDA mandate is to zoom in on two verticals: economic empowerment and progress and national security. Data shows that amid an overall fall in foreign investments in India, China plus one diversification has not been working either. Gaping trade deficits have mellowed the benefits of India's expanding international trade, with New Delhi recording its top two trade deficits with Beijing and Moscow. France and the United States' meteoric rise in India's defense sector has changed the modus operandi of New Delhi's defense industry cooperation as well. So, today, Indian defense industry pathways are closely linked with the country's evolving critical tech strategy on the one hand and with the geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific region on the other. It is not surprising that the tandem between critical and emerging tech, AI and semiconductors, and the defense industry is most apparent in India's extensive defense industrial roadmaps, both with the US and with France. This new age cooperation with emerging and critical tech and defense industries entwined is markedly different from traditional defense relations. Now, coming back to Modi's visit to Moscow, what should be the PM's agenda? Now that the two sides are reportedly preparing for their first bilateral meeting in half a decade. At least 5 interrelated issues must be prioritized. First is the mounting trade deficit. Rerouting of crude oil due to West's energy sanctions on Russia has been most consequential for the global oil market. Millions of barrels of discounted crude oil have found their way to India, entrenching Moscow, once the largest weapons provider, as the brand new energy supplier. In 2024, compared to overwhelming imports at $65.7 billion, exports from India remain paltry at about $4 billion only, with the trade deficit standing at $61 billion. This trade deficit couldn't be closed despite oodles of goodwill on both sides because its structural reasons actually are technical. Exports to Russia remain limited because trading with sanctioned entities has landed sanctions on Indian businesses. India and Russia need to build this confidence back into Indian exporters and guarantee the safety of their interests, which remains an arduous exercise. Second, the rupee-ruble mechanism has not been working smoothly, and this is a more significant factor entrenched with the trade deficit. Ruble's convertibility is a problem because it remains a currency artificially propped up by capital controls, which is a critical stabilizer against financial sanctions imposed by the West. The widening trade deficit has landed billions of dollars worth of Indian rupees in Russian Vostro accounts in different Indian banks. To keep the payment channels working, India has settled the bulk of the oil trade in dirhams and marginally so in yuan, whereas most of the payments against weapons orders are most likely done in rupees. Now, while it doesn't matter much if the yuan is used for settling some of the payments, it is against India's interests to make the majority of the payments in yuan because it strengthens China's fiscal grip over de-dollarized trade. The only possible way out of this deadlock is for Russia to invest the stuck rupees back into India. This will create new pathways for India-Russia economic relations to evolve and reduce the trade deficit in a meaningful manner. Surprisingly, while it appears to be an easy solution, it hasn't fared well beyond limited endeavors from Russia. As the cost of the Ukraine war is rising, the Kremlin must offset the decline in energy revenues from 2021 to 2024 and the strain on its available foreign reserves to continue committing 7 to 8% of its GDP to the war economy. Now, this trend corroborates a recent report that showed Gazprom recording a $6.7 billion loss for the first time in 2 decades. Despite these structural difficulties, creating pathways for investing a bulk of those rupees back into India remains the best bet for now. More tangible Russian investments into India should be on the top agenda when the two leaders meet in July. The third issue that demands imminent attention is the deliveries of the remaining 2 consignments of the S-400 air defense systems. As per the latest reports we have, they are likely to be delivered by the third quarter of 2026. That's 2 years. However, uncertainty looms on the matter of spare parts and maintenance and needs to be resolved. The Ukraine war understandably remains a top priority for the Russian military-industrial complex, but for India, S-400s are a critical component of its air defense layering. The last thing for a country with 2 disturbed and volatile borders is to leave a critical defense acquisition to the wishful thinking of how good or bad the Ukraine war might turn out to be. The fourth issue concerns India's apprehensions regarding Pakistan being invited by Russia to join the International North-South Transport Corridor, or the INSTC. Reportedly, Pakistan has agreed to join the project in principle and has begun the procedure already. From India's perspective, what made the INSTC so relevant was the absence of both China and Pakistan from a project that significantly expanded India's global footprint in connecting diverse geographies. But with these new developments, it is imperative for the Indian leadership to discuss the many scenarios of Pakistan's involvement. An entry into the INSTC must not strengthen Pakistan's case for a likely entry into the BRICS, the grouping of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The fifth issue is the likely damage to Russia-India ties from the repeated instances of forceful recruitment of Indian nationals into the Ukraine war. These activities have continued despite India expressing serious reservations and requesting the Russian side to put a verified stop to such activities. The seriousness of the matter came to light yet again when the Ministry of External Affairs released an unusually sternly worded public statement on the death of 2 or more Indian nationals in the war. Released earlier in June, it put forth India's stand in unambiguous terms, stating the impact on consonance on bilateral ties if the matter remains unresolved. A leaders' summit could be the best platform to convey the gravity of New Delhi's neutrality in the war across all kinds of domains. Engagement with Russia remains an important part of India's foreign policy, but it has to readjust to the uncomfortable realities of the past few years. Russia's silence on China's betrayal in Galwan, the deepening of an all-encompassing strategic alignment between Russia and China, especially after the Ukraine conflict, and Moscow's preference for Asia-Pacific and not Indo-Pacific shows that India and Russia must work out new semantics and pathways. Only then can they continue meaningful bilateral engagement which is suited to changed realities. The cooperation matrix between the two sides needs a reset, and the long-awaited Leaders Summit could be key to that. The link to my column is given in the description box with plenty of references for those who want to know further about it. I will be back to discuss how the summit really fared and its subsequent impact on the imminent issues I explained today. Stay tuned.